Few can fail to be impressed by the sight and sound of a mainline express steam locomotive at speed at the head of its train, thundering along. The great railway names, the London, Midland and Scottish, the London and North Eastern, the Great Western and the Southern Railways all vied with each other to provide the best serviced and the fastest of trains. And whilst the trains themselves carried names synonymous with speed, comfort or heroic achievement, the engines that hauled those trains likewise reflected, amongst others, personalities or places of note. And one of those places of note was Sidmouth in East Devon, a quiet coastal resort popular with families for traditional holidays since the Victorian era. So just how did this town, once at the end of a Southern Railway branch line, achieve the distinction of having its own mainline steam locomotive named after it? Local resident Nick Thompson takes up the story.
Well, it's an old story, isn't it? Because sailing ships used to be named and stagecoaches were named. And perhaps the first locomotive that had a name that we all remember is Rocket in 1825. And since then, various railways followed various customs of naming their locomotives after stately homes or parts of the empire or racehorses or whatever. The Southern Railway, they went through some of the various changes. They named a lot of locomotives after the Arthurian legend. Then they went on to seafaring heroes such as Lord Nelson, and then public schools. In the 1940s, their choice of names was more direct. They named locomotives after the towns that they served in the west of England, starting with Exeter, then Salisbury, then Plymouth. And when they reached the 10th one, they came to the name of Sidmouth, a seaside town in East Devon. Sidmouth is the only one which survived, which was named after one of the East Devon towns. And finally, we have the opportunity to restore it to pristine condition.
The Southern Railway always had an eye on publicity. In fact, it was one of the first British companies to engage in corporate marketing. There was an element of prestige and public interest in these names, and it gave each locomotive its own distinctive identity. The train stopped running on the branch to Sidmouth in 1967, but the old station remains as a reminder of the town's past railway connections. Sidmouth was rarely visited by express locomotives, but there was one notable exception. On Thursday 27th of June 1946, the Southern Railway's newest express locomotive arrived, driven by a local driver. At the station it was named Sidmouth by Councillor Lancaster Smith and much admired by local worthies. As far as we know, it never paid another visit to the town, but it spent many years hauling trains between Exeter and Waterloo. Locomotive Sidmouth was one of Oliver Bulleid's West Country class locomotives and appeared at the naming ceremony in its original streamlined state. Like others of this class, it was rebuilt in the 1950s. This rare archive film shows the engine in its final guise before withdrawal from service. Here seen leaving Waterloo. Sidmouth's first base was at Exmouth Junction Shed. Next it moved to Nine Elms in South London. For its final years it was based at Eastleigh. In March 1965 it was withdrawn from service and joined a long scrap line with hundreds of others. In the early 60s, modernisation beckoned, and British Railways was scrapping steam locomotives as fast as it could. Some were scrapped at Eastleigh, but many more were sent to scrapyards in South Wales, where there was a constant demand from the steelworks. Sidmouth spent 17 years at Woodham's scrapyard in South Wales. The sight of all those locomotives in Woodham's yard was irresistible. Small groups of enthusiasts sprang up, raised some cash, and in no time sold signs were being painted on the rusting shells of many locomotives. Buying 90 tons of rusting locomotive would cost around £5,000, a manageable sum even then. Sidmouth was one of the lucky ones, and today a dedicated group are starting on the restoration challenge of a lifetime. Southern Locomotives, itself an amalgamation of several one-loco groups, has done this work before. From a fleet of 7 locomotives, it is now focusing on the restoration of Sidmouth, some 70 years after the locomotive was built and 50 years after it was withdrawn from service. Sidmouth is back at the top of the restoration queue.
It's finally risen to the front of the line. We never thought it would, so we've decided that this is its best ever chance.
Preparatory work has already started, and from spring 2016, Southern Loco's team of paid staff and willing volunteers will be working flat out on Sidmouth. It's going to take around 3 years, and the total cost will run well into 6 figures. So, how will they do it?
The same as all the other ones we've done. Take it all apart, fix the bits that don't work, and put it back together again. I know it sounds very simplistic, but it's a very simple agricultural machine, really. We've got 5 full-time, part-time staff and a myriad of volunteers. Some days we have several, very few days we have none. Sometimes we've almost got too many. They're that keen.
The starting point for the group will be the original locomotive frames. Nick Thompson is enthusiastic about the task ahead.
So this is the frames of Sidmouth. This is the bit that holds everything else together. They've been sat rusting gently on this bogie wagon somewhere near Swanage, out on the Swanage Railway, and they've been there for about 10 years, and before that they were in a field in Kent for about 10 years. They were cleaned up and they were painted, but they're going to need quite a bit more attention before we can start to use them. But they'll go in the works sometime in 2016, and we'll clean them up and we'll put the wheels underneath and we'll put everything hanging on it, and eventually this 7 or 10 tons of metal will be the basis of the locomotive called Sidmouth.
We already have the tender built, which the last 2 engines we did not, and so it's a large 6-figure sum, but we've had very large 6-figure sums before.
Work here is in progress on Sidmouth's tender, and there is no age restriction in getting involved.
I was 70 when I first came down here.
So how old does that make you now?
89.
89. Do you think you're going to like it here?
Ha! Yes. Well, yeah, what I think about Sidmouth as your next project, I never ever thought it would be done. And when I go up and down the line and look at those frames, I still don't think it'll get anywhere. However, that's a personal opinion.
We've said that before, haven't we?
Yes, I've said it before.
This one has been sitting at the back of the queue since we've owned it. And we've decided now to bring it to the front of the queue because circumstances, movement of people wanting us to move things has made it a once-in-a-lifetime chance to get this one going. If we were to go back and restore one of the ones that's run before, this one would probably never get finished.
With financial support from enthusiasts and the people of Sidmouth, the project should be complete in about 3 years' time. And whilst it's unlikely the engine will ever steam into the station at Sidmouth, it will always be a roving ambassador for the town and an icon from the days of steam.
I think it'll be a fine tribute to the seaside town where it comes from. And I think people from all over the country will see it, because there are so many visitors, young and old, that go to heritage railways, and they will enjoy seeing a big green engine carrying the name of Sidmouth.
The team restoring Sidmouth have their workshop. They have the tools and the people, and they know how to tackle the job. But they do need financial support in getting Sidmouth back into steam. Southern Locomotives is a not-for-profit company with over 700 shareholders. Full details are available on the website, the details of which will shortly appear on your screen. If you can help, we'd love to hear from you.